I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Say things and break things and Jesus I was evil. I never shook, baby.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Reckless Musecast. We have a special guest, Entropyrian. He's a one-man band. Dude, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, so I've been listening to your music. You've got some awesome stuff. What I found interesting about your style is that you kind of go across a wide range of like different genres and styles, and you do this all by yourself too. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about, what motivates you to go from one style to another, and what are sort of like the pros and cons of being a one-man band.
So I've never understood any musician who can limit themselves to one style.
No.
I've never comprehended how you do that, because music comes to you in all kinds of different ways. And what musicians tend to do is they then tend to make a spin-off project where they try to get all of the acoustic guitar out of their system.
Right.
And I don't like that. It's like, why not just be yourself and let the audience work it out? Now, I understand why, because you need to sell albums.
Right.
You need to sell albums, and that album needs to be a coherent product of a coherent genre with a label on it, and everybody who's buying it knows what they're getting. But today, with the prevalence of singles over albums, why do that?
Right.
Why limit yourself? Now, then you have the problem of name recognition, people knowing what they're getting. I'm sure it's been very confusing for some people to click Entropyrian and hear a pop song one time, an acoustic piano song another time, and a melodic death metal another time. But I think that there are enough people out there who are like me and like all of these things.
Right.
And potentially it could work. I don't know if it works. I haven't built a big following yet or anything, but I'm seeing how it goes.
That's cool. So I'm curious. Have you noticed? You've put out a fair number of singles so far. Have you noticed like audiences gravitating towards one style of music more than the other?
No, it's very individual. So I have a song that's straight up pop called Rest, and some people, that's absolutely their favorite. They think it's really great. Some people like, really, frankly, I think it's a house song that I made, and that's their favorite. And for some people it's the melodic death metal, and for others it's the new metal or the hard rock. It really tends to hit different people very differently, because I guess it's all the different styles.
That's cool, man. So one thing I like about your music is there's a very atmospheric element to a lot of it that almost sounds cinematic. So I'm curious, like, do you have sort of outside influences? Like, are you inspired by film or any other creative mediums at all?
No, but I've always loved music very much, and this sort of ties into the what is the underlying theme underneath all the different genres thing, right?
Yeah.
And to be really obvious, it's what I like. But what I like has a sort of coherence to it, in that I like music that makes you feel deeply, as opposed to makes you feel happy or fun or, trite or whatever. I like music that really reaches in and messes with your emotions. Right. I like music that has very thick or rich sounds. One of my favorite things to do is play with synthesizers, new synthesizer packs, just going through all these presets and listening to all these sounds. And I'll just sit there with the keyboard and play a little progression for 5 minutes. And that's how half my songs start. Because there's this rich, thick, full sound that's just beautiful. And even listening to music before, as a kid or a teenager, there were so many songs that had an element in them that I wished the rest of the song would just shut up and let me hear that one thing. To give a really cheesy example, there's this, you remember Payable on Death, POD?
Oh, yeah.
So they had this song, Set Your Eyes to Zion, which was whatever. But the intro to that song had this gorgeous guitar riff with this echo on it. And I was like, just play me that for a little longer. Just delay the song a little bit, play me that for a little longer. So it's like this all icing, no cake theory, where it's like there's this part of the song that you love, that you think is really beautiful. I just want to give people more of that. So maybe that has something to do with cinematic, because cinematic, it doesn't have a lot of fat. It doesn't have a lot of requirements that it abide inside a genre. Like for rock, you're going to have your bass, your guitar, your drums, your singer, and it's going to follow probably an intro, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, end structure. Whereas cinematic just does whatever it wants to do or needs to do. Phil also said, Philip de Gosselin, Newtown founder. He also said that he heard something cinematic in some of the songs I'd made, and so that's interesting to hear that twice.
Yeah, well, I like how you brought up like the emotional element of your music. Where the emotion that's being conveyed through your songs is not a simplistic one, like you pointed out. Like it tends to gravitate more towards emotional gray areas, which I think film music tends to do a better job of, because it's all about accentuating the emotion of the scene rather than just simply being, this is a song about partying, this is a song about picking up chicks, this is a song about drinking and whatever. So yeah, but that's interesting that that
aren't you a Van Halen fan?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that's bad.
No, I'm joking. I'm just like, I'm pretty sure they're your favorite band, and you were like jerking off in front of Eddie Van Halen's guitar when we were at the Guitar Center. I had to be like, Joe, again, dude, you've already done it twice since we've been here.
I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with party music, but but no, that is interesting that the cinematic element, at least for someone, outside of the creative process, that just kind of arose naturally. That wasn't really something that you set out to do. But okay, so you're a one-man band. Do you have, like, have you played in bands before with other musicians, or has this been like your main way of
oh yeah. When I was younger, I was in a couple different bands, and I mean, at the end of the day, I was faced with a decision: do I want to try to do this for a living for the rest of my life, or do I want to, quote unquote, get serious? I decided to get serious, but because I had been playing music so much that I knew that it could become a drag. I knew that touring could be exhausting. I knew that, anything you do for a job feels like a job eventually. So I made the deal with myself that if I love music enough to do it for a living, then I love it enough to do it as a hobby in my spare time. And that's what I ended up doing. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I was releasing music under Entropyrian. That had to do with like a move that I made that gave me more space and room to record vocals and things like that. But yeah, that was the reasoning behind that.
So what are some of the pros and cons of being a solo musician? I mean, I guess you kind of already addressed the pros, but are there certain aspects about being in a band that you miss?
So there are a whole bunch of cons to being a one-man band and one pro. The cons are you can't get into your own head too much. That is a constant, incessant battle. When you're making your own music, making your own product, particularly a kind of product like music that is normally done by a group of people, or at least by a person who has a publisher or some formalized relationship with someone else who's going to check the music before he releases it, right? No one to bounce it off of. You don't know if that sound that you're hearing during the chorus, that sound is like, maybe it's string noise or something. You don't know if you're making that up. And or if anyone else can hear it. You show it to a layman and they're like, I can't hear it. And you're like, yeah, but you're a layman. So that's one of the hazards. The needing to do everything yourself is a lot of work. It can feel very daunting to sit down to a project and just go, Yeah, I need to do everything. No one to farm any of this out to.
Right.
You can't specialize
Hmm.
in any one aspect of the process like people in a band could. I don't practice guitar as much as I should. I don't practice singing as much as I should. I don't practice mixing as much as I should. So you really have to be a jack of all trades. But there's one pro. You don't have to work with any musicians.
Right. Well, I was going to bring up the band members' girlfriends breaking up the band thing, but I guess that's kind of extension of that same point.
Well, yeah. It's not just that though. You know, a lot of musicians don't approach music professionally. It would actually not be. There would be a lot more successful musicians out there. I mean, you know, however many the market could absorb, of course, but there would be a lot more bands that made it if musicians treated being a musician like having a job.
Right.
And many don't. Most don't.
Right.
Almost all don't.
Yeah.
It's a thing where they go into it with rock star expectations, and you know, people are late for practice. People don't take it seriously. People approach conflict resolution. People approach conflict resolution like they're on a playground instead of in an office.
Right.
In a band.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to just treat making music like it's your job, you can actually do it. But most musicians aren't interested in that.
Right. So one aspect that I noticed about your music was that there's a good amount of cultural commentary. So now we're going to get into some spicier topics. So I am curious.
My favorites.
Now Ben and I, we're both going to be anonymous on this episode now. So I'm curious about your process when it comes to sort of social commentary. Like, are there certain rules that you follow when in terms of like, okay, like, you know, this is the message I want to convey, but I don't want to be too explicit, or maybe I want to go over the top with it to make a point. Like, do you have like a sort of guiding principle for that?
So there are a couple different angles to take how explicit. There are multiple ways to view explicitness. And one of them is, what can I say without getting in trouble? Another one is, how explicit do I want to be for the purposes of providing my audience with affirmation of their views, right? And I actually tend to find myself struggling with the second one a lot more than the first one. You can get away with a lot in music because you're making art. And for people to try to shut down literal art itself and not like a columnist or a speaker or a teacher or whatever, that I think that is still not a great look. Not to say that that's stopped anyone, but I feel like there's a little more play there. Also, I try to check myself with my own views on things and not go too far off the deep end on anything. I'm extremely counterculture in pretty much everything I personally believe, but yeah, I don't really have the things that need to be said the loudest and the hardest are not controversial, but nobody's saying them in music. That's the thing.
Right.
It's so easy right now. It's such an open playing field. There are so many things that a musician or a metal artist could scream his fucking head off about, and they would be totally fine to say, but it's not fine in music, in art, in coastal politics, where all the record labels are, and so no one's doing it. So I don't find the getting canceled part to be as front of mind as the part of, how obvious do I make it? And how obvious am I going to let myself be in order to appeal to an audience?
So that makes me think, like, do you have to be more subversive with your music to get your point across? Kind of like how it used to be, honestly, for most of history, you know, artists were, whether they were novelists or musicians, were writing and singing about the same stuff we are today, but it's not like wet ass pussy. It's about a wet ass pussy, but it's, you know, in a poem or in literature or something. And maybe do you have to kind of go more of that route and be a lot more where like people who know the I don't want to say the signals, but or no, you see what you're creating, but it's not so overt.
So this is a really rich topic, because I covered one of the aspects of the explicitity versus not explicitness. What is the word? The quality of being explicit.
Yeah.
I
guess explicitness.
Yeah, explicitness.
Probably explicitness. Yeah. So there's so many different ways to look at this. So what you said, Ben, sort of brought to mind a whole nother aspect of why you might balance one against another. To me, it's about the subversiveness of the art is a really big factor. If you can get someone to like your music and love the song and feel the lyrics before you smack them across the head with some explicitly political view, then you might have influenced someone's views. The music has done this forever. Music, plays, people talk about how Shakespeare was a commentary against royalty and through comedy. And why would you cut out so many people that you could be influencing in a way? The way the Christians talked about, Satanists influencing their kids subversively or whatever. Be subversive. Be subversive. Don't preach to the choir all the time. So that's another reason that, I want to. It's no hard and fast rule. Fuck Trump is super obvious as a song, and it's pretty obvious that it's satire or sarcasm or whatever. Satire sounds pretty high-minded. It's just sarcasm. But others are more metaphorical. I released one just recently called "Not a Person," and I put it out there, and I asked people the cover art, the song, the lyrics. What do you think it's about? And it was really interesting to get replies. It was subtle. It was subtle enough that most people didn't, but some did. And that brings me to another aspect of subtle versus explicit that I think is really valuable in music, which is the euphoria you feel when you finally get it. It's like putting a puzzle together and like, I got it. I understand now. That's so cool. Yeah, now I see the cover art. There's this symbol and the lyrics say this, and it's called this, and that all makes sense. It feels like you've unearthed a treasure, discovered something. And when you make music too obvious, you're not giving your audience a chance to do that.
I also think that just there's going to be a percent of people who, if you make some song that's pro, whatever stance, or you write something that's pro whatever stance, a section of people are immediately just not going to listen or read or watch or whatever it is. But if you just make good art, you make good music, and then people find, I like this musician, I like this writer, they'll look more into it. And it's kind of like you get that you kind of break that first line of defense, and then they'll give you a chance, and they'll say like, I can, I like this music, this message, I kind of a knee-jerk reaction to it, but I'll give it a shot. And then, they'll dig a little deeper, maybe check out your other work, check out the artist's other work. And who knows, like, it's not always about like changing minds necessarily, but it could be, making people more open-minded to something, because right now everyone is so like, it's just like this duality. It's everyone I agree with is right, and everyone I disagree with is wrong. And well, it's actually more than that. It's like evil. It's like morally just and evil.
Yeah.
It's not even right and wrong anymore. And I think, you said like bi-coastal politics. Like, so if it's a more conservative side, you kind of have to be the subversive ones now. Like the conservative side in art, in a lot of in movies and art. There's going to be still some explicitly patriotic or right wing or whatever movie, like Ben Shapiro's. I forget. It's the Daily Wire. Like they're making movies now. Like they're and then
Terror on the Prairie.
Yeah, like it's going to be a lot of pro guns, pro. I don't know exactly, like pro American, and that's all fine too. You can make all of that explicit stuff. But I think it's actually more powerful, because that's all that's going to do is like, do you think anyone, maybe besides some blue check critics to then pillory it or roast it in their columns are going to go watch any of these movies that are Ben Shapiro's company made. Like, they're just not, because Ben Shapiro made them.
Well, anyone
or his
who's
company.
not already a Daily Wire subscriber.
Exactly. That's what I mean. You're not winning over anyone, and that's fine. You do have to, you know, feed the base, whatever side you're on, you know, multi-sided, whatever. If you're pro-Palestine, if you're pro-guns, if whatever it is, like you can make art for those people too, but you're not winning anyone over. And it's not as, I don't think it is as, you know, it's not as clever. Like I've written things, and I tend to write, I mean, I'll write satire and dystopian things and extreme views at things that I'm making a point there. I'm like, look, if we keep going down this path, this is what it could possibly look like. But you know, sometimes I can be more subtle about things, and I feel like that gives people a better understanding. Or I'll write, like, I wrote something called the liberal argument for Columbus Day, and a lot of people who, like, if I just wrote why Columbus was good, which I wasn't saying that he was good, but like why I actually think he's a bastard, and I say that in my first sentence, but here's why we should still have Columbus Day, from a liberal point of view, like from a left-wing point of view. And I think sometimes you have to do that to get people even to say, like, oh, well, okay, I never thought of it that way. I might not totally agree with it, but I see where you're coming from. I think we need more of that, not to toot my own horn here, but we need more of some crossover appeal instead of just like signaling to the base all the time.
I literally just tweeted out a link to an article I just finished called Not a Person, the Secular Case for Abortion Restrictions.
Interesting.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I'm definitely more fascinated by gray area arguments for things. Like, for example, Jordan Peterson has talked a lot about, or I shouldn't say talked a lot about, but he actually he at least a few years ago, I don't know, his opinion may have changed on this, but he talked how he loves Canada's healthcare system because it actually encourages people to take more business risks, like more likely to be entrepreneurial because they have, if my business fails, then at least I still have my healthcare. So it's like, that's kind of like a more, I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree with it. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms, but it's like, oh, that's interesting. Like a right wing endorsement of healthcare, of public healthcare, which I thought was interesting.
I also, I'm sorry, Joe.
Go for it.
I just also think, I mean, with Jordan Peterson, first of all, now I would very much say so, but was he always considered like right wing, or did he kind of have a shift when he got raked over the coals?
Right wing.
Yeah, he. I know.
He's not right wing.
Years ago,
I can't see any way that he is right wing in a way that would define that 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah. So, from what I understand, he was part of the Liberal Party of Canada for a long time.
The Labour Party.
Yeah, the Labour Party. Well,
or no, Liberal Party. Sorry,
yeah, it's the Liberal Party, because the Labour Party is the more progressive.
Labour Party is UK. Yeah, there's the NDP, which is like even further to the left, kind of, and then there's the red. I know the colors. The red is Trudeau's party, the Liberal one. Yeah,
right. But he was, I know, but he the party that he was with for a long time was kind of center left, sort of moderate.
Liberal, yeah.
But he saw in recent years that they were being, they were moving farther and farther to the left, so he left them. I don't know what his specific stances are on things. Well, but that's the thing that works. Like, it's not enough to be 90% progressive. Like, you have to be 100% progressive, unless it's just like, you can't be moderate left wing. Yeah.
In the way that the terms work these days, you are either extremely pro social justice or you are right wing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I know. It's so funny to me. And honestly, and we've talked about this before, it's a losing strategy that they have. The kind of the crits, as I call them. Like, you're only pushing people away, and that's not how you win in our society. Like, you need more people to win, really. And by labeling everyone who's not even, it's not even a right left thing. It's just because there are people, I think, on the far left who don't line up with the base and the establishment, and they get called, all things, and they get pushed aside. It's really whatever the mainstream narrative is, which now in America is very much we could go through all the stances, but it's very much a, whatever the flag thing is in your Twitter bio, it's almost always socially progressive and liberal, but really like corporatist in terms of economics.
Well, it's not just a static set of beliefs. It's a static set of beliefs that is constantly updated to include new things that are expected to be in that static set of beliefs. And then plus on top of that, there's a rotating category called current thing that you must also fully support. So
what's the current thing right now?
Intense.
What are we supposed to support right now?
I think we're right between Ukraine and climate change.
Well, what about that dude with the big fake tits at that school? Like, isn't that something that?
But that's also Canadian. It's also Canadian.
That's a thing, but that's really a right wing initiative.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like he was just put. It's not like he was just cast as the Little Mermaid.
Right.
But it's not the left that put him out there. The right did. Right. So the right has been going on the offensive on many of the transgender issues, and that's a right thing. But as far as the current thing, what we have to believe, or it might be MAGA extremism. That might, at least according to Biden.
It's big. It's big, which drives me fucking nuts. Is, to put it bluntly, like democracy. It's just whatever they define as democracy, and whatever's anti-democracy, you have to be against. Which they never gave a shit about democracy before. The Democratic Party pulls undemocratic stunts against their own people who they don't want to win. A lot of these primaries.
That's right. I was just thinking the Obama
the
primary.
Hypocrite. Yeah, they're the biggest hypocrites ever.
Rejected signatures.
You just have to look. You can look at whether it's the there's like a Green Party guy running in North Carolina. I actually followed for a little. I kind of liked him at first, and then he started a lot of the transgender shit that I can't stand. All the gender stuff, but they pull the most undemocratic moves so that their people win. Nancy Pelosi does it with Democrats all the time, and usually it's against more left-wing people.
We're kind of past the point where accusations of hypocrisy even land anymore. I think we need to start doing them again. I think that's necessary to take back that word from it's not even like the word's been abused. It's just useless.
Yeah. I've never heard in our discourse this, like, everything about democracy all the time. It's like not even the Washington Post at their letterhead is democracy dies in darkness. Like, when did this become?
That's interesting.
Yeah, this whole obsession with them. It's kind of like a fetishization of democracy. Which
or a subtle...
I honestly don't believe that they give a shit about democracy. If they could, they would wipe out everyone who they disagreed with. And I kind of mean this on both sides, but right now it's the Democrats who are obsessed with this. They would be more than happy to silence, at the most modest way to put it, silence everyone who doesn't agree with them and not leave it up to the democratic process at all. They only leave it up to the democratic process because they have to so far, right? They don't give a shit.
I think one of the biggest reasons for the focus on democracy as a word is that if you can get people to focus on democracy and forget about everything else, the everything else is the Republic, is the Constitution, is the Electoral College, is the Senate, is the Supreme Court. If it's just raw democracy, then they can use their media machine to convince 51% of the country to do just about anything.
Right.
Yeah.
With no restrictions. None. Democracy is absolute power, absolute tyranny of the majority, and this country is a really big problem for people who want that, the way this country's government is built.
Well, I think for me, one of the biggest problems I have with the overuse of the word democracy is just how vague it's applied. Like, and I don't think that, the vast majority of blue check folks who are shouting this word out all the time could actually be able to define what democracy is. Like the actual sort of like the functional definition of it, but that's kind of part and parcel with the sort of establishment left just take buzzwords and just run them to the ground. And if you dare disagree with them or question them on it, then it's like, you're automatically you're one of them. You're not one of us. I had the same problem, with diversity and inclusion. It's like, well, what do you mean by diversity and inclusion? What at what point do you say, okay, that's enough diversity? That we're inclusive enough. At what point do we stop with that? But it's like, no, it's
when all the white people are gone, Joe.
It's not just that.
Stop.
It's that inclusion necessarily means exclusion, because they can't pick who applies to the job. They can only pick who they reject.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they mean exclusion when they say inclusion.
Joe, what did because you said that last episode. What was it? Was it diversity through? What was that term? Expansion?
It was diversity by addition, and not diversity by subtraction.
Which is kind of the same thing. We were talking about the Little Mermaid. I argued that she should actually be Asian, but that's besides the point. I mean, this is the concept of, if you want to have diverse princesses, make more princesses and make them diverse. Don't change the ones that are already white or whatever it is. That's kind of that concept.
Yeah. Well, so a good friend of mine who's also a musician, he's talked about his frustrations with a lot of this stuff too, where it's like, so he's a professional musician. He's been professional for like the last 20 years or so, and he's played with musicians and ensembles around the world, like in Africa and the Middle East and in Asia and in South America. So he's a pretty global guy. But for one of the institutions that he works at, they sometime in the last few years, they basically said, so to renew your contract work here, you have to, write an essay talking about your pledging your allegiance to diversity and inclusion. And it's just like, I've been tolerant of like every single culture and every single country that I've ever played with, and you're forcing the gun in my head saying that I have to, but you're not going to define what you mean by diversity and inclusion, yet I still have to pledge my allegiance to it in order to have my job. Like, what is this?
I want to hear my words in your mouth.
Yeah.
It is this strange new, I don't know if it's new. I think actually we've had it a while.
It's getting worse.
Well, we've had it in a different way. Like, you used to have to pledge that you're not a communist, right? Like back in the 50s, McCarthy era. So there are this concept has existed. It's just flipped now, where that was why the Babylon Bee got suspended from Twitter. And if you've listened to the episode, I forget his name, but the guy who runs it on
Seth
Joe
Dillon?
Rogan. Yeah, Seth Dillon. I think that is it. They could come back, but to come back, they have to basically affirm that what they said is wrong. And that's why he's not doing it. It's not just like, oh, you have to, I don't even know. It's like, I think he has to delete the tweet, which is anodyne and stupid.
Well, it's delete the tweet, and in deleting the tweet, you acknowledge that you broke our rules.
Yeah, and that you were wrong. Like you were morally wrong, and that's like a political stance. And I know, again, on Joe Rogan, I don't mean to keep bringing it up, but like Tim Pool argued with their lawyer and Jack Dorsey. It's like, no, you guys say you're neutral, but like making you affirm and not say certain things about gender, like that's a political stance that actually not that long ago didn't even exist, or it was in our discourse, or was considered XYZ, and like, so that you're not being neutral there. And this is an example of like, no, it's not. It used to be we just have to get along. We all have to get along. Let's respect each other to an extent. We can have satire and make jokes and everything like that, but now it's no. You have to actually like say that you're with us. So you have to be a quote unquote #ally, which is different. But there's a stark distinction there that kind of just like slid in the past however many years.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's fucked up, man.
Well, I make Joe affirm that he's Latinx every episode, so we're gonna wait to do that.
Oh man! Oh yeah, it was also we're in Latinx History Month now.
Yay!
Congratulations,
Entropyrian. I don't know if you're Latinx too, but if you are, yay!
Quantum Latinx.
Quantum Latinx.
Well, I mean, now we're getting closer to Halloween, so now we got the Hispanic SJW saying, if you're white, you can't dress up as Mexican or whatever. Meanwhile, like actual Mexicans are just like, we don't care, we don't give a shit. Like,
yeah. I think I told you on one of our first episodes, Joe, if I could wear a sombrero.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Halloween's
yeah,
always
man.
a good. Always the freaks come out, and not the fun freaks that used to come out on Halloween. The other types of freaks.
But I want to ask you. We're obviously living in a in a culture that's very hostile, not just for like questioning things, but also kind of doing it in the form of through art, through it seems like whenever a major studio movie comes out that's very harmless, it's still like, well, it was pro masculinity and masculinity is bad. It's just like, yeah, this is a dumb action movie. Like, there's nothing political about it. So I'm curious, man. Like, what can artists who do not fit in with the sort of orthodoxy of thought, like what can they do to survive in this hostile environment, for that an environment that's hostile to free thought?
So I don't know, and I'm trying to figure that out. Anonymity is it makes promoting music very difficult, to say the least. Right. No touring, no, even just the concept behind TikTok, looking at someone's face, looking at their eyes, right, in every social media post or whatever. Yeah. You're losing a lot of the potential draw there, and then you can do it non-anonymously, but then you're probably going to need to support yourself with your music, and you can't start it that way. You can't start it with it supporting you. Yeah. Not like any other job. So in my opinion, the thing that they all need to do is band together. And this is kind of if I had one thing to like really put out there in this podcast, it would be that the right is not fighting the culture war. There is no culture war. There is a culture totalitarian state with a few vigilantes fighting a few skirmishes all by themselves. There is no organized resistance. There is no guerrilla radio. There is no underground music scene. It isn't there. It doesn't exist. And the people who are on the scene already, I don't know if they've tried to do it and failed, or if they haven't tried to do it. I don't want to judge anybody without knowing what they've done and been through. But this has to have occurred to someone, and someone needs to do it, because it can't. Individuals who risk getting canceled or banned at the stroke of a keystroke. Yeah. Trying to get out there and say things that require courage to say in public right now. They can't all do it on their own. Right. And the left has understood this. The left did it subversively. The left promotes artists who from nothing. They go out and look for talent. They have ways for talent to come to them through performance shows or record labels or talent scouts or TV shows or NPR's Music Hour or whatever. They have all these mechanisms. Oh, and on top of that, grants, endowments, all of these different mechanisms to get all of this intellectual and cultural capital just flowing, torrenting through the system all the time. And we on the right have Tom McDonald, Zuby, freaking 5 times August, Bryson Gray, and I don't know. If I'm leaving someone out, I apologize sincerely. But you get what I'm saying. We have individual people fighting individual battles on their own. We have no, like you read about, I've been reading a lot of James Lindsay recently, and he talks about how the critical race theorists got together. They formed communities, collectives, and they let their ideas synthesize. They said, we want to change the world in this way. What can we do to make that happen? And they had meetings and communes and this and that. And they got together and their ideas formed a greater idea that worked.
Yeah. So I definitely agree with you on the culture is obviously the mainstream culture is a liberal culture. That's without a doubt. You have Disney and Hollywood, universities,
the tech sector,
like all of that. Absolutely. Right. And so I think there's 2 conversations to be had here. There's like the financial side of it, and then there's the art side of it. I think the art side of it actually I mean, I'm not right wing or left wing. I don't associate with either. I'm not centrist either. I'm all over the place. And I know you follow me on Twitter, and you probably see a lot of my politics. I think socially, I would be considered in some ways right wing, but I think that's just a lot of anti-crit woke shit, which to me is actually very left wing, anti-authoritarian. But whatever.
Our terms are in shambles.
Our terms are in shambles, right? And that's why I don't have any labels. And I think Joe and I both are just like independents. But for art's sake, like, so one, I do think there's a backlash. How significant that backlash is going to be, I mean, look at Top Gun. Like, that's mainstream as it gets. You have probably the most famous actor in the world who made it unabashed. I haven't seen it, by the way. I want to.
I watched it. I thought it was cool.
Unabashedly pro-American, like military, all that stuff, right? I didn't see, maybe there's some social justice stuff in there. I don't know. But I know, big picture, I think they like snub China, which is a big right-wing move in my opinion. So I know it's one movie out of many, but there is that. There's still that mainstream, I think, craving there, where people who I think really gave up on Hollywood movies, and I know some of them went and saw it and loved it. Like it was kind of like it was the 90s again or something for them. Two,
go ahead with two. I'll try to remember my point.
Two is people always said, well, if you don't like Twitter, go make your own Twitter. You don't like Hollywood, go make your own Hollywood, right? And I do think that is actually kind of starting to happen in some ways. I brought up Ben Shapiro's, it's a minor player now, but you could see, but I think some people are starting to kind of fight back the culture by making their own. And I think it's unfortunate that that's where it has to go, because I think it's going to become, you have left-wing movies and you have right-wing movies, or conservative and liberal movies. When we used to have movies, and you made Red Dawn came out, and so did probably some very liberal, like pro-liberal movie or whatever, at the same year from the same studios or whatever it was. And unfortunately, probably not going to go that way. But in terms of the art, like, one, Ari Shafir, who is a comedian, if anyone's listening doesn't know, I mean, he said it himself, like, it's dangerous to be a comedian again. Like, that's when good art is made. I'm like, punk rock wasn't some like endowment or some grant. Like, punk rock came about because people met in dingy bars in the Bowery and in Seattle, and I mean, it's more grunge, but what you see what I'm saying, like, that wasn't some like money infusion. That was just people coming together because they had similar messages and they played their guitars really fast, and that's how punk rock was made. So, like, yes, the quantity of all of this art that's coming out is very establishment liberal, even like, nauseatingly progressive, but it's boring and it's stale. And I think people are getting sick of it. Netflix, the biggest streamer, they did cancel a lot of these shows because people weren't watching them. People are sick of it. They're sick of being scolded and being talked down to and say how you should think. So I do think that some of that is going by the wayside. It will always be, I think, the establishment, but I do think there is this more natural backlash that's going on that isn't, like you said, James, the I forget what their names were, the law professor from UCLA. She was a big part of the critical race theory, and some of those others, like, they did actually get together and try and create something that's very Marxist of them, like meeting in some apartment to do that. But I don't think that's, and it's true, like, that is a very Marxist thing, but I don't think that's going to happen with the right wing necessarily. But I do think it's more natural, and that's a good thing.
I just think
that's where good art comes from.
The right would do that if they really wanted to fight this battle. If they really wanted to win, they would get together and talk about how to win.
I don't think it's about winning. Like, and if the right does win, I think we're gonna have the same thing as like the 50s, and then you're gonna have the same backlash, and then you're gonna have the 60s again, and that led to the 70s, which was terrible. That's where we probably are right now. I mean, but actually, the 70s was great for art because a lot of the culture was terrible.
About Top Gun, here's the thing. They are in such dominant control that they produce countless media that is extremely anti-conservative. When they throw us a bone and give us a piece of media that is not anti-left, it's not anti-conservative, we see that as a win.
Right.
That's not great.
That's true, and I did talk with we've had a singer on a couple times named Alma. She was one of our first guests. We like her a lot, and I brought this up to her, and she said her music's not right wing, but it's a pop song that is about oil workers in North Dakota. Like, I think if you're going to put a label on it, it's right wing, right? The liberals aren't making songs about the oil workers in North Dakota. Like, it's not happening. And I do think that there is this craving for that. Because like you're saying, there's so little conservative minded art in mainstream media.
There's an absolute dearth of supply.
Yes. So then when it does happen, I get that there's that craving for it. But I mean, I'm sure you're a free market guy. Like, then there's a need in the market, and artists have to, and I do, but I do think that's happening more. I do think it's headed that way, and it will balance out a little more. Disney will never become like right wing, and that's fine.
Even moderate,
It's always going to. I don't think it ever will be, and that's okay.
If the money points in that way one day, 50 years from now, and it's just all the rage to Handmaid's Tale it up, they'll do it.
Yeah,
the board of directors will decide to go for that.
Yeah, but think about it. Like, I can't think actually of a better time for there to be independent artists.
Absolutely. I'm not talking about everyone getting together and forming a commune and whatever. I'm just talking about
then you'd be a communist.
Cross promotion. I'm talking about having some kind of in most any scene, you can point to a venue. You can point to a record label. You can point to a rich person, something that tied some different acts together. It's very rare for a new musical revolution to happen because of one man or one band alone. They typically got together somewhere or coalesced around something.
Yeah. Well, so I'm just thinking out loud here, but it was inspired by something I heard on a podcast not too long ago, but I think that for artists to be able to survive in this sort of environment where, I think thinking in terms of left wing and right wing is a bad way to go. I think we should be focusing more on values. I think that's something that we should be, because there are a lot of disaffected left wing people who are frustrated with the establishment left. And I think that,
I was one of them. That's where I came from.
Yeah, no, same here. Yeah. So, and where it's like, there are a lot of right-wing people who are pretty moderate, who are like, I'm not ultra conservative. We're sort of like, like we should be, we might disagree on numerous policy issues, but we can band together. But look, freedom of speech benefits all of us. And even if I disagree with you, we can still be friends. So I think we as artists should be focusing more on values rather than policies, rather than on political parties.
Oh no, I'm just saying right and left because it's short. I don't know what it means. It means whatever you want it to mean. Our terms are in shambles again.
Yeah. But I think it's sort of like
whatever JP Morgan's HR department is saying is left, and whatever they would fire you for is right.
Right. But I mean, a few years ago when I was much more of a progressive person, there was a knee-jerk reaction when an artist that I liked, when I found out that they were right-wing, I was like, I'm not going to support them anymore. And now I look back, I'm like, oh, that was dumb. Like, I still like their music, or I still like their literature, like that, But I think it's in terms of I think the other reason why we should be focusing more on values rather than issues and policies is that, values are more universal. So, for example, like a movie can come out and, that's about responsibility. And even though responsibility, I think is definitely associated more with the right. At the same time, it's like, there are a lot of left-wing people who are like, hard work is what gets you through in life. So I think that's a better way to unite people.
I also think so go ahead, dude.
I think it's always been associated with right, but I think that Jordan Peterson is the one who really brought that to front of mind, the idea that personal responsibility is a right-wing feature because of how the left attacked him over it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we could have found plenty of people on the left who would say that openly before Jordan Peterson.
Right.
It's I also think we have to remember, I mean, I do, as much as the establishment media wants us to be at each other's throats, like they thrive off of that. It's good for their business. They were tanking before Trump, 2015, 2016, Trump came in, and then they found a boogeyman to rally around. I do think, a lot of us are more similar than we're not, despite whatever statistics are out there. to the contrary, I do think that most of us share a lot of similar values. Twitter isn't the world, like, as much as it feels like it's something. Like, the three of us met on Twitter, all right? Like, we're saying that from, right? Like, you guys don't know each other outside of Twitter, right?
We met a little bit through email, through Philip,
right?
But
okay,
but it was mostly through Twitter that we've done.
No,
Twitter.
we haven't had a beer. No.
Right. So I do think that, like, that exacerbates the worst of everyone. The algorithm literally does that. Like, it wants you to do that. A perfect example is I keep seeing tweets. People I do not follow them. They know that I don't like them because I've commented. And that's why. It's because I engaged like once weeks ago, and I keep seeing the tweets, and I keep pushing. I don't push mute, but I push not interested. I'm like testing it. Why do you keep showing me these same people? It's because you want me to engage, and you want me to engage negatively, because that gets someone else to come and engage negatively with me, because that's what increases engagement. And the longer your eyes are on these apps, the more money they make. That's literally how they work. So like but this isn't how the world works. So I mean, I say I'm very against social media and what they stand for. I love Twitter because I have a lot of fun on it, being myself, but like I hate them for what they've done to this country and what they've done to the world. But I do think that, you know, a lot of us do still share those values. Places like universities are I think there's a problem. Don't get me wrong. We are churning out graduates who don't share these values. That is true. Like where free speech is valued is not where it used to be, which was like universities and young people. It's much older generations now. So I do think that is a problem. But like Joe was saying, I think that we're more similar than we're not in many different ways, not in every way.
I think that one of the most potent ways that we're dissimilar is not real. And by that, I mean, there is a very large number of people in this country who believe whatever they're told to believe by the people that they consider trustworthy, the media, experts, whatever. And the media and the experts tell them believe this, and they're like, okay, well, they must be right. It's not real. It's not the Sunnis and the Shia. It's not the Protestants and the Catholics. It's some people, and what I've noticed is that that's why there are so many people who 5 years ago, left and right, are together on the in this sort of counterculture movement, because the one uniting feature between them is people who have values and hold to them and won't be told what their values should be, versus people who will be told what their values should be. And the problem here is the megaphone telling them what their values should be, and that they're telling them to believe things that are fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And so people talk about civil war and national divorce, and we can't live with people who believe all these things. And I'm like, they don't believe it. They're told to believe it. They're doing what they're told. You cut off the source. It's like a sci-fi movie, right? Like sci-fi movies, different from war movies. War movies, big battles. Everyone's just slow, trudging, pushing back and forth against battle lines. Sci-fi movies, it's always one thing. You press the one button, you kill the queen of the colony, you defeat the mothership, and all the rest of them fall. That's what we're dealing with here. It's not countless battle lines. These people believe what they're being told to believe. And it's not a sincere or deep-seated difference. Nobody believed any of this stuff. Nobody believed half of the things that they would consider their core values 5 years ago. Right. If that tells you anything.
It's also because everything. This isn't new to say. Everything's political,
right?
Yeah, everything's political though. Like, look at COVID. Like, for 30 seconds, we were all in this together. And then immediately it started being, what's the Republican stance on this? What's the Democrat stance on this? And I don't think it's not possible. This is why I don't ascribe to any party or any ideology, because it's not possible for someone who's a Democrat to believe, you know, A through Z, and all of them believe that. Like, it's just that's how human beings work. Right. That's what happens every single time. You know, it's the new thing. It's, you know, overwhelmingly, if you have that Ukraine sticker or thing in your bio, I think it's safe to assume you're voting Democrat.
Right.
Not everyone, but overwhelmingly so. And probably if you have an American flag in yours, you're probably voting Republican, overwhelmingly so. Or if you have a Blue Lives Matter or whatever it is, but people don't like. I live in a very just what you would picture when you picture suburban neighborhood, single family homes, streets with driveways with streets with 2 cars, like very standard suburban. And I could and I do this around election. I've lived here for a few years. I do this around elections, and I go around and I jog around my neighborhood a lot, and I pick out. I'm like, okay, I see you have a Democrat yard sign for Congress. You have a Republican. Do you have an American flag? Do you have a Ukraine? And I do that, and it's shocking how little overlap there is. Like maybe 1 or 2 houses that had a Democrat yard sign had an American flag. And
it's because Dad fought in the war. And they're
there's
like
one
deeply military family.
Yeah, and I would love to know. There's one house that's down the street from me that has I'm not exaggerating, 30 Marines flags, like they're little ones, and then 1 big one, but also a Ukraine flag. So I'm like, okay, are they I don't know. Are they so right wing that's like, no, the Russians are still the bad guy. We should be fighting them. Or
could be an old person. There you go.
Yeah. So I don't know, but I do, and it's astonishing how little overlap. I've never seen someone with a Blue Lives Matter flag or whatever it is with also like a Democrat yard sign. And I'm going to do it again this election cycle with the midterms coming up. Probably the next few weeks, I'll start seeing the signs, and that's kind of also how Twitter works too. It's like I can tell. Once in a while there'll be like a right-wing transgender person with a trans flag in their thing, and they're a token, to be honest. Like they're 1 in a million. But that doesn't mean there aren't right-wing trans people, but they're not doing that. They're not showing it in that way, because it's a lot of it's signaling.
Well, it's the co-opted identities that the left believes. The whatever you want to call them, I think the group I'm talking about, believes that if you're not, if you don't hold their viewpoints, then you're not legitimately black or trans or gay or whatever.
Right.
And that's a really effective enforcement mechanism for ideology. Excommunication, basically, what cults have always done.
Yeah. But on a lighter note. Well, so I do. But before we start wrapping this up, I do want to ask, man. Do you have hope for our culture? Will things start to simmer down a bit, where we can start having, being able to question things a little more publicly and express ourselves a little more freely without fear of cancellation or worse?
Absolutely, we already are.
Yeah,
we already are. People are getting canceled, but it's not like this weird, why did he say that kind of reaction?
Right.
It's not this weird, people think, no, everyone knows that we all think these different things.
Right.
And also we have to believe that, right?
Yeah. What's
the point of not? When you let yourself consider defeat, you're done. So don't.
Right. Yeah. Well, positive change is never brought about through pessimism.
Right.
So it's and also this the hyper woke way, it's such a high intensity, high frequency way of living, like waking up and just being angry about every movie, every TV show, every book, every song. At some point, there are so many stories of reformed SJWs. It's such a tiring way to live your life.
We've had them on the show.
Yeah,
Kimmy's a great example of that. She said it herself. Kimmy's a black woman from Uganda, South Africa. She's lived in both. I know that. And now lives in California. And she was like, she would wake up, basically be pissed off, look for every microaggression, like for every single racist microaggression. And she didn't have a quote unquote come to Jesus moment. I know she's very Christian, but she had that moment where it's like, what am I doing? I've just been brainwashed. This is no way to live. Whether this is legit or not, and she determined on her own it's not legit, but whether this is no way to live. And I do feel sorry for those people who are constantly looking for conflict and control. And it's a lot of people, and we saw this to a T during COVID with masking, it's a lot of fucking hall monitors who became adults and they get off on telling people to pull their mask up or don't say a certain word. I roll my eyes. I was told recently at something to not say a certain word that to me is a totally anodyne word that I don't know. It wasn't like the N word or anything. It was just and I was like told not to say that, and I'm just like, all right, I know my audience here. I won't, but those I think people who like to control other I that's scary to me, and that's where you do have to push back. It's not. I think you should be able to have whatever flag you want and say whatever you want, really, unless it's a threat or we go over doxing and threats and all that. But it's the people who then that's not good enough anymore, and that's what we usually talk about. It's about controlling what you're saying, not letting me say what I want to say.
But the subject we were just saying about people waking up angry, I think that's another white pill. Is age sands off some rough edges on everyone's personality. No. It sands off some intensity. It wears people down a little bit into something a little more mellow. Some people grow up curmudgeonly. Some people grow up caring, whatever. That's not the rule. Sure. The rule is that you tend to mellow out a little bit. And my understanding of the next generation, so we have the millennials starting to probably enter the process of simmering down a bit. And my understanding of the next generation is that a very large number of them having grown up in this. And when you grow up in something, you can see the contradictions in it more easily. Like a kid seeing the contradiction in his parents.
I think that's a great example. Is I've heard again. I'm not.
We have a reason to be hopeful there too.
I've heard that actually Gen Z is like more conservative than millennials in a way, and it's like, well, you always wanted to rebel against your parents, so the parents were religious Reaganites, and then the kids were the opposite of that. And now it's kind of like, well, the parents are the annoying 46-year-old wine mom who's annoying, and then the kids are going to be like, I don't like that, I'm going to go to church.
Well, I think another thing that gives me hope is that it seemed like a few years ago when those of us who were paying attention, we were seeing a lot more maybe subtle signs of things going in a bad direction. But it was harder, I think, to get normies involved. So if you say, hey, they're teaching kids, some crazy things about transgender people and sex and biology in schools. It's like, but it's about transgender people. We should be compassionate. But now it's like they're teaching middle school kids about how to have safe non-binary anal sex. And it's like, okay, all right, this is like now it's much easier to get a regular person to get
exactly. 7 years ago, there was this video that went around everywhere, and it was this. I'm sure both of you will remember it. It was this high school gym teacher in a field with a bunch of high school students. And he says, if you grew up with a cell phone, take a step forward. If you grew up with your parents' divorce, take a step back. And, it was this big lesson on privilege. Right. And I saw it and I was like, oh my God, teaching kids that they probably won't make it is the number one way that you can teach a kid not to make it. You can guarantee that they won't. And I saw that as evil, just like the moment I saw it. But convincing normies, convincing anyone else of that, when you don't see it, when you don't perceive that, like, you are disadvantaging these people by telling them that they will be kept down.
Right.
Hard to explain.
Right. It's easy to brush that off. To be like, oh, well,
like, it's well-meaning. Then
a
monkey suit with a big dildo in front. In front of the 7-year-old.
Sorry, my cat unplugged my headphones and I had to fix it. I just came back to monkey suit with a big dildo. Where did this conversation go?
Great.
I don't know if you saw me all flustered there.
Oh, he's back. We have to stop talking about that.
But to what you were saying, Entropyrian, what you were saying, where I think that the culture, or whatever, has to be fought is not necessarily in the arts, because where we went over, where I think it could be good and create legitimate art, and kind of create these subcultures, which a lot of art comes out of. I do think that there has to be a switch with like teaching. Like that is where more conservatives or just like not psychopaths have to go into teaching, whether it's at the college level or like, and I don't know what it is. I think liberals and progressives are more apt to go into teaching, and more conservative people are more apt to go into business and those in law, maybe those sorts of fields. But I think that is such a that's a part where there needs to be a change is teaching children.
Liberals are more likely to go into teaching. They're more likely to go into administration. They're more likely to go into the arts. Why are we fucked? Again, because they totally absorbed all of these fields into a monomaniacal ideological viewpoint. I mean, I do see art as one of the most important, because there are times when I see a new development in the news and I think, oh my God, what is even going to be done about this? How can this be countered? And I keep coming back to the idea that people need to have different values. We need to find a way to instill values that in people, an admiration for freedom, an admiration for liberty, for not having an all-encompassing, all-caring, all-providing, and all-deciding father ruling over you in the form of the state.
Right.
I just like, people need this fire in their bellies, this passion for autonomy, liberty, freedom. And I keep coming back to the idea that if art could come back to inspiring that in people, so many of these problems would be fixed downstream. And it's obviously not the only one. I think it was, Antonio Gramsci who said that there are 5 pillars that need to be taken over in order to completely take over a society. Religion, education. I remember those 2. But yeah, 5 pillars, like religion, education, family, art, and state. I don't know. But he boiled it down to it being multiple things. So it obviously is multiple things, right? So I wouldn't say that art or music is the only thing, but for sure, a lot of these different things need to be done. People need to find the thing that they're good at, that they can do right now.
Yeah.
If you're an administrator, if you're an HR person, if you're a businessman, if you're a musician, do your HR, your business, your music, whatever you can, and try to do it in a way that helps us out of this.
I think also, though, like, I don't, how do I put this? Like big, whether it's big banking, you brought up JP Morgan Chase, tech, law, a lot of these areas are now very democratic, small d, or excuse me, uppercase D, Democrats. So big I don't think that's big D. I don't think that's good. But if the right wing still controls a lot of the money, I don't know if they do, but or if the administrations in these schools are not captured by the crit logic, like what I don't get is, and you were starting to say this with like what's going to happen, like you can say no to stuff, like you can say no to the DEI takeover, like you can say no to the protesting student, like be a fucking adult. You say no, we're not going to do this, because what are the consequences if you do? If you say no, I mean, a handful of schools have. I know, like University of Chicago came out and said, like, basically we're not doing this stuff. Like, what will happen? There might be some protests. Like, all right, they have to go to class or they get Fs. Like, and then they complain that they get Fs. Well, that's what we told you you're going to do, and we warned you, right? Or if I don't have some DEI, like, what's going to happen? I don't really understand it.
It's really hard to comprehend why they keep capitulating.
Because I agree, because I don't think it's a majority view.
No,
I really don't. Maybe in
none
like,
of it is.
And like some in some nonprofits, sure, in some very specific areas, but like these are not majority views. A lot of people don't like this stuff, and I don't just mean like a lot of like straight white people, like tons of people all over the like gender and race and religious spectrum, like are really against this stuff. So
I mean, what 2% of Mexicans like the term Latinx?
2%, yeah, 2% of Latinos like or use it. Of way more, like 25%, not only dislike it, find it offensive. Yeah. Like, or like don't know. The vast majority
just don't know. Yeah.
Don't know
it's literally linguistic colonization.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So like they're actually offending the people they're trying to not offend, like overwhelmingly. But like that's what I never understood is like just say no. Like, okay, a bunch of students come to you. Maybe it feels like a lot, but it's definitely not like a majority of the school. Like to take down some statue or to change some textbook. Like, just say no. Okay, we hear you. No, we're not doing that for these reasons because, and you can give 1,000 free speech arguments. Why not? Like, or maybe they make a good argument. And you say, okay, we're going to make this change, but that's not what's happening. So I don't understand why more businesses and schools, just because I don't believe that these 67-year-old administrators all of a sudden believe in like this DEI stuff. They're scared.
Well,
I think the institutional capture is deeper than we give it credit for, and the potential repercussions with mechanisms that are not available, that are not in our view, within the administration, within the funding, something or another. I think that there are when you look at what they've done, it's been very methodical. The people who believe in these radical ideas, they've gone through organizations and administrations and governments and everything very methodically and created, like, look at a DEI policy that talks about how all future hires are going to be required to profess, to show what they've already done to further DEI. So you select for activists. So I think they've done a really good job of shoring up the being able to exert pressure in all of these organizations from some direction or another, visible to us or not.
No. Well, I try to look at it from both sides here. Like, on the one hand, it cracks me up whenever a celebrity who, by all accounts, is probably pretty progressive, but if they say something, some minor offense, and then they apologize on Twitter or whatever, it's like, yeah, 10,000 screaming people out, you might seem like a lot, for someone like me who has, it is, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but you have like 12 million followers. 10,000 is a drop in the bucket for you. Like, your next movie is not going to fail because
it's probably not even 10,000. It's probably more like 1,000.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like your next movie is not going to flop. Your next single is not going to flop because for one day you refuse to apologize to a handful of screaming people, which might seem like a lot. It might seem like a flood of people just telling you how evil and terrible you are. But it's I think it's hard for a lot of people to step back and be like, yeah, there's a group that's mad at me, but the vast majority of people either agree with me or don't give a shit. So I'm just going to focus on them rather than this tiny minority.
So basically, are you saying that it's possible that when people are mad at you, it just feels like more than it is, and that's one of the reasons?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you've seen how some artists work. They'll get criticism from one person that lands, and they're like, any of us, if you get criticism that lands, it feels like everything.
Oh yeah.
And the media, like, we'll read an article, you can literally plug in the whatever race or gender, whatever it is now, some social justice minded article like Pink News or something, or Jezebel or something like that, and it'll be like, and they'll give their support for the so and so said this, and here's the backlash. It'll be like 3 tweets from random accounts. That's like probably people like me fucking with them, and it's my burner account might be on there or something, and it's like now this person thinks that everyone hates them. I mean, if you think that you're kind of gullible and you should have thicker skin than that, but it also goes back to what I was trying to say is like, maybe you're right, and there's some deeper, and I understand there's this methodical capture, but I still don't think it's even close to a majority. And it's people who are really nasty and who have an agenda, and it will I'll give a perfect example. Actually, my high school football team was on Fox News 2 years ago during the fall after the George Floyd riots, right? Mm-hmm. This was crazy. They ran out on the field. It was like Dare Night or something, like the drug and whatever, the police night, and they ran out. They always have like a American flag, and they ran out with a Blue Lives Matter flag or something like that for like to support the police day, right? Like every game is something else, alumni game, whatever it is. This was like support the police or something. And
so this wasn't like a clothed streaker with a Blue Lives Matter flag. It was actually like during the game they had someone running around with.
This was the team ran out.
Oh,
like out of the entrance, like
got it. Yeah,
the end zone ran out, and one of the flags was a Blue Lives Matter, I think, something like that. And then like one teacher or some like one or two teachers like made a stink about it. I come from a very liberal, affluent area up outside of New York City, and made a stink about it. And the principal, who like I know personally, like we like good friends with my family, wrote this insane letter, like condemning it and talking about racism and stuff. Like it honestly just feels like this is a guy who went to Princeton, was like an all-American wrestler, went to Princeton, like this really smart guy, and it's like he's short-circuited because words like racism and police brutality and things were being thrown, like he just didn't know how to handle it, and it breaks really educated Ivy League educated people, and they don't know what to do. And my response would be like, I'm not going to say his name, but Dr. So-and-so, just chill. Just say, okay, we hear, like, it's okay. It's okay. Like, they did this because that's their speech and they decided to do that. And that's the end of it. Like, because a handful of people made a stink about it, you're going to then condemn your own high school's team and call them like, and the father of one that went on Tucker Carlson, and the father of one of the players went on and talked to Tucker Carlson about it. And and you know, this is not like some high school in Texas where it's a lot of right-wing people. Like, this is if you look at the voting record for this town, my hometown, it's probably at least like 2/3 Democrat, if not like now 3/4, probably three quarters to 1/4. And it's just madness. And I'm thinking to myself, like, dude, just don't say anything. It's okay. Or say, no, we're not going to, like, if the players want to run out with this flag, let them run out that flag.
I mean, it's definitely very hard to figure out why the capitulation, why the continuous capitulation.
That's exactly what I don't understand. Why? Just say like, okay, I hear you. You want to have a debate about it? They never do, right? They never want to talk about it because they don't do well in that. There's actually I don't mean to go off on another tangent, but I'll be real quick. There's actually a really, really good, I'm surprised they did this, Vox series. Or was it Vice? One of those. Vox or Vice, one of them. And what they did was, this was really cool, actually. They took like groups of people like Latinos or gay people or Black people, but they were actually diverse outside of that. So it was like gay people, but you had a guy wearing a MAGA hat and a guy like a very kind of social justice-y, and like probably 15 to 20 of them. And they would ask them questions. And it was really shocking to see how, and this was back when actually I was like very much a Democrat liberal person, how much better like articulate and better well spoken the conservatives were. And people were commenting, and it was like the Black conservatives and the Latino conservatives, and you know why? Because they constantly have to defend themselves. They constantly have to give their arguments. And the other side is, well, they're constantly being bolstered, like buttressed by whatever, almost always, wherever they are, whether that's a liberal arts college or a high school teacher, like almost always. And I was a Bernie supporter, actually still kind of like Bernie in some ways, but like big Bernie supporter during the 2016 election. I was in a social justice minded law school, and I felt that. Like, I felt like I could say no wrong. And I could tell. I went to school in the Deep South, and I went to school with conservatives, and you could see that they couldn't say what they wanted to say, but I could. And there is that like validation there that the professor will either 100% agree with me, or if they're conservative, not really push back.
Right.
And I do think that's a problem.
Yeah.
But you should watch that series. It was very interesting to me. I was like, wow, they really, like, the conservatives here really know how to speak compared to
you know what came to mind for me when you were explaining the premise was just how solidly that series probably defeated the idea of inclusion, because the core idea of inclusion is that your identity category is going to affect the way you think. So you would have expected all these different groups to have similar thoughts on things.
Yeah. I mean, they don't want, we say this every episode, they don't want diversity of thought or anything else. They literally just want the most superficial diversity.
Right.
They want skin colors and genders and sexualities and religion and all that. But if
fight racism by emphasizing the importance of skin color.
Yeah, exactly. But they don't want any diversity in thought whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though that is the selling point of the diversity of physical features, that they think differently.
Well, that's what it was. That's actually
why your team is going to do better, because this person, because of the color of his skin, is going to have a different idea about how to solve the problem.
Right. Well, I think that's one of the arguments for affirmative action, used to be like actually diversity in thought too, but that's not how it's worked at all anymore.
Yeah.
It's in fact, I would think that conservative non-white people feel the same way. Like they can't really speak in a lot of these same settings because they'll be called, you know, sometimes like an Uncle Tom or a coon or like the worst things because they're not because no one gets attacked worse than a traitor, like whatever side you're coming from. And unfortunately you're looked at as a traitor if you're not, you know, falling in line with why, like, no, we brought you in here to support what we're thinking, and now you're going against that, like you're a traitor.
It doesn't even have to be something specific. You just, I think the biggest reason why so many people go along with all this is they don't want to be looked at as stupid.
Yeah,
I think stupid is the, if not the, then next to the most powerful persuading insult that the left has against so many educated people, so many people who are trying to live their lives. Nobody wants to be stupid.
Right.
Stupid Trump supporter.
All right. Should we start wrapping this up?
Yeah, I gotta go shit post on Twitter some more. So,
well, hey, thanks for coming on the show, man. This is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, this is good. And we should definitely do this again sometime.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. We'd love to have you back on. And you know, and we tell this to all of our guests, like, you know, whenever you have like any kind of big release or any kind of project that you want to announce, feel free to like come on our show. Just like, hey, I'm going to be dropping a single next week. Is there any chance that I can come on the show to talk about it? Like, we'd love to have you back on, man. So,
all right.
So,
it seems like we wouldn't have a lack of things to talk about.
No, absolutely, man. So can you let our listeners know where they can find you?
So you can find me at Entropyrian.com as it's written on the screen. That's a link to all my media and social accounts. Find what I am currently thinking on Twitter or Getter. And the music is on pretty much every music streaming service, as well as all of the video streaming sites. So whichever one you use, I'd really appreciate a sub.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, man. Thanks for coming on the show. Keep up the good work and stay reckless, man.
All right.
Fight the crits.